Welcome to Chapter X. I'm your host, Michael K. I'm really trying to properly introduce my guest today. And I guess what I could say is he is definitely a type A personality. He's absolutely engaged in life. He has fully embraced the very real challenges that he lives with. And he cares so much about life, about giving back, and about making a difference. So welcome to Chapter X, Thom Barrett. So, Thom Barrett, you've really had quite an interesting journey. And before we kind of dig into some of the things that have brought you to my notice, why don't you just maybe share a little bit about you, your background, from whence you come, and what brought you from there to here.
Everyone's got a story, right, in terms of how you get to here. Mine's not all that interesting, but before I retired, I was a partner with PriceWaterhouseCoopers. I had my foot both on the audit and the consulting side. My expertise was in technology, but I didn't want to be a coder, so I didn't go into the IBM programming route. I wanted to really help companies understand how technology can aid them in their work. This is during the 70s, so it was before technology was even a thing. I mean, it was something academics did, military did, but your accounts payable department, they were still using the green ledgers and et cetera, right? And so I spent 32 years with Pricewaterhouse successfully, for my mind, because I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the challenges. I spent all of my time in the financial services space. Working both in the trading aspect as well as the fund administration, as well as the custodial, which I think you're a financial services guy, so you understand all that stuff. But somewhere along the line, though, I decided that I needed to do things differently. So when I turned 40 years old, I said to myself, I've had a good life so far. I've got a great family. I'm doing stuff with the family. I'm doing stuff for work. I'm giving back to the community, but I'm not doing something for me in terms of my development. And so that's when I decided I wanted to start doing outdoor activity, because I was a city guy. Grew up in Detroit and then moved to Cape Cod, but I wouldn't consider Cape Cod as being an outdoors paradise unless you're a sailor, which I did do sailing, but I wanted to be outdoors. I wanted to be in the woods. I wanted to be in the mountains. So I started do trips. Now I'm a type A personality, so I don't do anything half-assed, right? So
you can say assed on that. You can say half-assed or full-assed. It's fine. It all works.
All right. And so I started doing these trips. I mean, and they weren't just, I'm going to go down to the beach, I'm going to go to the Bahamas. I'm going to go off and to the Alps and ski mountaineer, or I'm going to go up to Alaska and helicopter ski, or I'm going to go, kayak, Prince William Sound. And I did these trips mostly because, I wanted to do what I suggested. I wanted to become more in tune with the outdoors. But because of what I did, I was always on call, right? And, going to Nantucket for the summer wasn't far enough, right? Going to Colorado wasn't far enough. So I started doing these trips that were really remote and not accessible. So someone couldn't call me on the phone. Someone couldn't send me an email.
You were off the grid.
I was off the grid before off the grid was cool. And that's what I did. So I went to a lot of remote areas. So when I retired, and I retired at 55, right? The retirement age for a public accounting is 55 to 60. Most guys stay to 60. They want to make some more money. Me, I said, that chapter is going to be done at 55. I don't care how far along the book's been written. We're closing it down. And I'm starting a new chapter because 55 is still young and I want to do all kinds of stuff. And so when I retired, I had a focus, right? I wanted to focus on developing my creative side, right? Because I had spent so much time in the analytical space, right? I wanted to see what these hands could do in terms of constructing things. I wanted to see what this brain could do in terms of creating things, and what I had in the heart in terms of doing things a little differently, broader, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing I wanted to do was get back to the community. So I started doing work with Habitat for Humanity. And the third thing was I wanted to continue my travels, and I wanted to continue them in the most remote places this world had to afford. And so when I retired, I had a game plan. All right. I was already focused and ready to go.
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second,
Right.
only because I'm really interested to understand, because most people that I speak to is, during their work career, between family and work, they're really narrow in their focus. And so the thought of what do I want to do next escapes so many people because their focus has been so narrowed by, family requirements, career, blah, blah, blah. How did you open up your lens to see these other things in the midst of, the career pressures of PricewaterhouseCoopers and family and all that other stuff? What was in the DNA there, or in the maybe conscious thinking that allowed you to look outward?
I've always had a creativity. I'm sorry. I've always had intellectual curiosity.
Okay.
And when I started working, I considered myself, believe it or not, an adventurer, because I was going down a path that was not a path. I mean, the notion of combining accounting and computer science hadn't happened, right? You couldn't point to, oh yeah, there's a career path here. So in a way, I had to forge my own career path, which I loved. I loved that in terms of every morning when I woke up, it's like, we're going to do something different today. I don't know quite what it is, but it's going to be different because I'm going to help a company embrace something, whether it was Excel spreadsheets when that came out, or it was, let's build a website. Let's disintermediate, right? Let's take away the middleman. Let's do something in terms of we can go direct to our customers. And that was all fascinating for me. But to be a leading edge technologist, you always had to be on top of stuff. So I'm always reading. I'm always looking at what's happening in the world. And while I'm doing this, I'm also seeing that, wait a minute, there's a lot of stuff going outside of my area of technology. And so I've always had a foot in both. The notion of going to these remote places was for me to recharge. And so for me to recharge meant I needed to do something completely different than what I was doing during my 9-to-5 existence, so that when I came back, I was mentally, physically, and emotionally charged.
That makes so much sense.
Progression from work to retirement or play was an easy one for me. I know that a lot of the guys I hung out with, CFOs, when they retired, they became CFOs, they became CEOs, right? Because they still wanted to be, they loved the hunt.
Right.
They loved the hunt. Even though they're accountants, they still love the hunt. I love the hunt, but in a different way now, right? I'm chasing helicopters, or I'm chasing snow, or I'm chasing, the rivers, right? To each his own.
Absolutely. So what happened along that path of, adventuring? Anything that derailed your progress?
Oh, well, a lot. So again, being the type A guy I am, and I'm a bit of a control person, right? And so before I retired, I said, I need to try a few things to make certain this notion, right, of being a creative type, of being an outdoors type, right? Things I hadn't done before. Let's go to school. So while I was working towards those last few months of my, before I retired, I went to school. I went up to the Wooden Boat School up in Brookline, Maine. Have you ever heard of that?
Nope.
Great program. It's been around for almost 100 years, doing all aspects of boating in terms of building, whether it's a dory, a kayak, a schooner, whatever. And I took a 3-week course up there on the fundamentals of building boats. And I said, that's pretty cool. I loved it. I said, this nicely goes into my outdoor. I want to become a kayaking guide, take people out on expeditions, and I'll build the kayaks that we'll enjoy. But I said, but I also need to have some more skills. So I took a woodworking course over at the North Bennett Street School in the North End in Boston. And what's interesting about that school, it is the oldest contiguous trade school in the U.S. It was started sometime around the late 1700s, early 1800s. And so they've got 12 programs. It's a trade school, right? You can be a carpenter, you can be a violin maker, you can be a bookbinder, right? Some really weird things, but That's what they do. So I took a 3-month course for that. And then the day I retired, July 1st, I put in motion taking a course with Knowles, a National Outdoor Leadership School, which teaches you how to be a leader in expeditions outdoors. I said, all right, this is great. I'm getting all the things I need in terms of some background. Now, the Knowles course was a little bit of an interesting thing because I didn't do much homework in terms of what it was about. It was a 3-month program. We were going to live in a tent for 90 days, doing different venues. And I'm thinking that they're going to be like-minded people, like-aged people. I get there, and the average age, with my age included, was 18.
Huh.
So there were 16 and 17-year-old people there, no one over 18. Right? I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. Hey, Gramps, what's going on? But it was a great experience. I learned a ton about living, not so much about the outdoors, but about living with uncertainty, right? Living with adversity. Some very interesting concepts that, believe it or not, as my career took off, because in technology, it's all about mitigating risk, right? We don't want to be doing something and exposing yourself to more burden than it's worth. I had some great conversations with the instructors about this uncertainty thing. Isn't it all about trying to mitigate risk and trying to reduce it? And I'll tell you a story later about how the penny dropped for me, not then, but 12 years later, how the penny dropped. I did some things to make certain that what I had up here, I had up here in terms of my head versus my heart about this makes sense for me. And so when I started off my retirement, I was already, and one last thing I did was I built myself a shop. And this shop is pristine. I mean, it's not a small little shop in your garage. I built a 30 by 20 foot, 2-story structure, right? And it's got the latest and greatest shit in there. And it's like, any workman, I bring my friends over, my guy friends over, and there's like drooling. Oh, this is a great spot, man. I'm not going home.
That sounds awesome. For those who are attracted to the idea of, really digging into the, creating with their hands and, with their minds to their hands of what they conceive. I think that's, it just sounds like you've really thought through this, the process really well. How long have you been, since you transitioned out of work to retirement?
So I retired in 2012.
Okay.
At 55.
Okay.
I'm now 68. And so it's been a great run. I've had, 12, 13 years now. But during that time, it's been some changes have taken place. So when I retired, first thing I did was I did that 3-month course with Knowles, which was great. And then from that point forward, I spent the summers working on building furniture. And then I spent the rest of the time traveling. I don't like the heat. And it's a good thing for me because when I travel, it's off season. So it's great. I mean, I can go to all parts. I mean, I still do go to the national parks in the middle of wintertime. I remember one time I'm standing in the base of Mount Rushmore. It's snowing out. No one around me except the 4 boys up there. And it was awesome, right? Because you got George with a little snow in his nose, right? And it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. And there's no one else around. It's like, I take it it's like, this is the way it should be, right? And just enjoying it. Then I went over to Geronimo and watched what's going on in terms of that creation of that sculpture. Again, no one was there. I spent a lot of my time traveling in the wintertime, which most people consider to be the most ridiculous thing, but I find it to be the best thing. Because there's no competition for camping sites. There's no competition. And when I turned 60, right, so in 2016, I decided I want to become a ski bum. And so I built myself a truck camper, do-it-yourself truck camper. It looked pretty, it was aluminum, it looked white, looked like I bought it, right? And then I proceeded to, at first I jumped into the truck camper around February and go spring skiing out in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and et cetera. And I loved it so much that start point of February, moved to January, moved to December, moved to November. Pretty soon I was on 7-month trips, right? Where I would spend the first part, like the spring, the fall time, traveling across Canada or heading up to Alaska, enjoying the sights, and then finding my way back down to British Columbia when the snow started hitting, and then just follow the snow. And it was a great existence. I didn't get that chance when I started work, because I graduated from BC May 21st, started work at Coopers and Librand on June 6th. And of course, the time in between was finding an apartment, looking for roommates, life chores. But I didn't do the let's go to Europe for a year or the gap year, the things that people take as a matter of course today, right?
Right.
And so I figured at 60, and the good thing about doing the ski bum thing at 60 is I had a shitload of money. So it wasn't like, living hand to mouth like some of the other poor ski bums I was with. But I was living out of my campers. It wasn't like I was staying at the Four Seasons, but I was living a good life. No complaints.
Well, you were living the life that you chose.
Absolutely. And then unfortunately, 2016, so between 2012 2016, I did a ton of stuff, right? I biked across Eastern Europe. I went from Prague to Budapest. I kayaked along the Dalmatian coast of Croatia. I biked from Zagreb down to Dubrovnik. I kayaked the Exuma archipelago. Spent 2 weeks doing that. I circumnavigated this island that's in the midst of Victoria Island, which is in British Columbia, Nootka Island. Spent 3 weeks doing that. Took a cruise up through the Inside Passage, and I started doing these trips across country. I was living life, doing exactly as I wanted to do. But then 2016 arrived, where I found out that I had prostate cancer. And I took the test, realized what the issue was, and so I had the prostate removed, figuring I'm done. And I get back in my camper, and I spend the next 3 years doing the exact same stuff, right? Figuring this cancer thing's dead, and I'm good to go. And then I come home, doing my regular checkup. 2019, find out that it's back. Have to go through radiation, have to go through ADT. Again, thought it was done. Go back and started doing my trips again, right? And now I'm doing some diving. I'm going down the cenotes and the Yucatan. I'm, diving down the Great Barrier down in Belize. So I've got a lot of activity still taking place. The behind of my head now, I've got this other issue in terms of how long is this going to last, right?
Sure.
How long is this going to last? And then after one of my trips cross-country skiing and stuff, I come home in 2023 and found that the cancer had gone to stage 4. And then I decided not to do any treatment. And what I decided to do was to go down to South America for 4 months and see what I can experience down there. Started by kayaking off the coast of Antarctica Peninsula, and then started hiking and trekking from the southern portion of South America through Chile, through, Argentina, Bolivia. But unfortunately, when I was in Bolivia, I suffered from HAPE, the high altitude pulmonary embolism. And so I had to be evac out. And I came home, and then I found out that the stage 4 had progressed up to my chest, and I've got a tumor in my eye. And it's like, I got to really go and start taking the treatment. But an interesting thing happened. Instead of falling prey to being a victim, and lamenting over my life sucks, I can't do anything I want to do anymore, I took my creative energies and focused them on writing. So I started writing books. I've written 5 so far, and I started writing travel. I started writing travel articles, but they aren't your normal travel guide, about, all the high spots of when you go to a particular town. What I took was the spiritual aspect of, all right, what was it like kayaking off Antarctica? The remoteness, the coldness. What did it mean? And then use that to reflect against the disease, this terminal disease, in terms of, how do you come to grips with knowing that your life is being measured? And it's a lot shorter than you'd hoped, right? And so I started writing. And that's what I've been doing. But I still do my travels, right? So like next week, I'm heading out to Scotland, not to do some trekking, but to spend 2 weeks traveling around the northern part of the coastline of Scotland, going to all the islands. The Isle of Skye, Hebrides, Orkney. It's going to be an interesting, and I'm going to kayak along those islands. And then in August, I'm heading on another polar trip. This time I'm heading up to Iceland, Greenland, go through the Northwest Passage, and again, kayak up along to that area. So my goal is to continue doing as much physical activity or as little, right? That's why I do the kayak thing, because all I got to do is up here, not a lot of trekking. But I still want to be able to see, to feel, to experience, right? And I can still do that.
So maybe you can share a little bit of, maybe put yourself in that kayak or vessel wherever you like in Antarctica, and thinking about here you are in this incredible nature, and here you are facing maybe a life-threatening situation. What was that like for you?
It is life. I mean, it is a terminal illness, right? I've got a 30% chance of making it to 228. I don't dwell on that point. It bears little in terms of what I gain from dwelling on that point. And the outdoors has become a real special place, almost sacred to me, because I'll use the example of kayaking off the coast of Antarctica. It's quiet, except for the noise of the calving that takes place, and watching it and then pop back up again. And you just hope to hell that you're not that close to it, that it comes landing back on top of you. But I look at things now at a slower pace, right? Because I'm living in the moment. I've really embraced the notion of mindfulness, right? Being in the moment, experiencing every aspect of what you are involved in 100%, right? Not thinking about around the corner or the, that I leave the lights on in my room or, that kind of stuff. And what I'm witnessing is that Mother Nature tells a great story. And one of the stories it tells is, you can't beat me. You have to live with me. And I've learned that if I'm looking at things correctly, she is so helpful. Right? For instance, I can choose when I kayak to go with the current or go against the current. I'm going to go with the current because I don't have to paddle as hard, and I can see a lot more and I enjoy a lot more. But I've learned some things. I've learned some things about accepting my own limitations because I'm not as strong as I used to be. And that's why paddling with the current is far smarter than trying to surf against it, or it's just sitting and listening to what's going around you, because there's nothing about nature that's predictable, right? I mean, we know scientifically that things are going to happen, but when you're sitting there, it's unpredictable in terms of when the head of that orca is going to pop up, all right? Or when this huge southern sea elephant, is going to decide to, paddle by you, right? And scare the living daylights out of you. Or that calving takes place, right? And so you have to be present with the hope and expectation that something brilliant's going to happen.
You're not sitting there scrolling through Instagram or Facebook at the time.
No, I'm just paddling along and just taking it all in and just, wow, could this be more perfect? And yes, it's cold. And yes, there's a wind. And yes, there's all kinds of other things occurring that, we're kayaking through mush. It's like the slush, right? You'll have to eat slush. We're kayaking through slush. That requires some work and navigation. It's still going to be sharp, right? It's not like you're just in Disneyland and just hanging out. There are animals out there that still want to get you. There's Mother Nature still going to come up and do her thing, right? But I found now that if I take a slower pace to things, I enjoy it a lot more. For instance, when I go trekking through Patagonia, I really didn't do any trekking. I went with my significant other join me. And so we go on the treks. I knew that I wasn't going to go more than 15 minutes, right? And we go for a 4-hour walk. And she would continue on with the guide, and I would just stay, and I would just sit there. And at first, it's like, I'm so pissed at myself for not being able to be strong enough to go for the hike. Then I would sit there, and I would look. And I'd say, I think this is a little better. And I'd see the fox pop out, right? See the puma over here, which no one ever sees, right? The wind coming through, the clouds funneling around the mountaintops. And I'm going like, whoa, this is stunning. And so for 3 hours, I would sit there and just be amazed at all the life that was around me. And if I was trekking and being focused on where my next foot was going, I wouldn't be seeing all this stuff.
Right.
So I look at what I'm doing now in nature far different than what I did before, because, before 2023, it was about challenging me physically, right?
Right.
Climbing up that summit, kayaking for long distances for many days. It was about thrill and the physical aspect of it. Now it's the thrill of just being part of it, right?
What I find so fascinating is your ability to be with it, at peace with it, and that acceptance of being able to say, okay, can't do what I did before. But instead of being, all pissed off about it and being all, blamey or griping about it, you found peace with it. And that journey, can you point to any particular moment where that revelation came to you, where I can be at peace with this?
It's been an evolving one. In my book I just wrote, they released it a few weeks ago, April 8th, called The Edge of Now. In it, I talk about these points, right?
Okay.
And it's about accepting where you are, right? And when you do that, it's multi-layered, right? It's not like, the light goes on and you're there, right? Because it's accepting that you're sick,
Right.
all right? And accepting that you no longer have control over that. And, you go from a warrior where you think you're going to beat the shit out of this thing to like, okay, it's my companion. It's not a companion I like, but I'm stuck with him or her, but I'm stuck with it. Like you said, either I can be the victim or the victor. I'm choosing to be the victor by identifying those things I can control and not even trying to approach the things I can't, right? So when it comes to accepting, I accept my limitations. I accept the adversity that I face every day because I am sick. So I suffer from fatigue. I suffer from nausea. I suffer from vertigo. And every day I get up, I thank God, first of all. I get a chance to see another sunrise. I know it sounds cliche, but it's not for me. I mean, It's like, oh, good. Good. Now I can brace this day. And some days, I'm going to brace it from my bed because I just don't feel good. That's why I need to sleep. And other days, I brace it from outside and I'm doing something. So I'll give one story in terms of where something appeared. And this is an area of which has been most difficult for me. And that is accepting help.
Mm-hmm.
You're a guy. I'm a guy. That's the last thing we do. Throw it on my back. I'm going to carry more shit because that's what I do. And so I'm in Argentina. It's a hot day. A hot day for me. It's 85 degrees, right? Most people think it's great. I'm like, oh, this sucks. I'm sweating bullets, right? And I'm on a tour of Iguazu Falls, which is the most magnificent waterfalls I've ever seen. And I've seen quite a bit in terms of it on the mountain. And so there's a lot of hiking, a lot of walking, right? And so I'm now walking up what amounts to be about 4 stories in terms of height, right? And I had underestimated the degree of heat and the impact it would have on me. And so I'm walking up the stairs and I'm red-faced and I'm sweating and people are offering me, because they can see that I'm just about to blow up so red, offering me water. I'm going, oh, no, I'm fine. It's only a few more steps. I'll be able to take care of it when I get up there and I'll buy some water and stuff. It comes to a point where I'm getting so dizzy, I stop and I have to sit on the stairs, right? And my head, the head between the legs, right? Trying to, make sure I get enough oxygen, whatever it is. As I'm doing that, I'm looking straight at my feet. And then I notice someone leaves a full bottle of water at my foot. And I look at it and I see who's there, and the person's already gone. All right, now I have the water, right? And so I take out my handkerchief, pour the water on it, throw it on the back of my neck, started sipping. I'm going, holy shit, I'm feeling better. I was like, what an idiot. All these people offering me assistance. And I said, no. Why? Now that I have it, I'm in a different ball game. And I was like, so 2 things happened just then, right? The person gave kindness and never really saw the benefit of what he just did or she did. It was just a random act. And me, on the other hand, was like, wow, That's special in terms of accepting it. And so I now, that's part of my vernacular in terms of accepting assistance. And I always thought that accepting assistance meant I was weak. And that was not a sign of strength, it was a sign of weakness. But I've now realized it's really a sign of strength.
Yeah.
Because to be vulnerable in front of someone, you are exposing yourself. And I have found that in doing that with my friends and my family, because I was always the guy that they always came to for, right? And now I'm the guy that can't do it anymore. And I'm finding that as I open myself up to that vulnerability of saying, I need assistance, my relationships are getting stronger and deeper. Because when people see that, they want to help, but then they start sharing it themselves, right? And they start talking about stories, and especially amongst guys, because guys don't talk about anything that's going on with them in terms of health-wise, emotional-wise, et cetera, right? And so it's like almost I've given them permission to talk about this stuff because I've shown a certain amount of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
Now, I've got the relationship I have with the number of guys that I've known for years have taken it to a wholly different level. So there's a lot. There's been so to answer a long-winded response to your question of was there a particular point in time? No, there has been a series of points in time, but each one showing me a different aspect of acceptance that I had not thought about, right? And so we just went through acceptance of assistance, acceptance of uncertainty, acceptance of diversity, right? Acceptance of limitations. And so as time goes on, I'm getting to be a better person because I'm learning these other aspects of myself that I'm becoming, I think, more emotionally available.
So it's very interesting, 'cause when, as we started our conversation, we talked about this whole idea of, the type A personality, have hard charging, focused, right there. And that kind of metamorphosis to saying being that type A driver personality isn't necessarily those tools are not necessarily what you need in all times of life, and that they need to kind of reshape themselves into something else.
Yep.
If we get locked into this idea of, oh, I'm just this type A, driver, blah, 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 and maybe that's not going to, it might help you during your career, but it might not help you in this next chapter as you are transitioning into and uncovering different parts of yourself and what's needed now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Well, I'm going to take a little bit different twist. I didn't retire to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I retired to see a different part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that hasn't changed. But it has changed in terms of the degree of physical activity. I'm not climbing peaks anymore, but I'm still going off and seeing Patagonia, for instance, right? Or I'm still seeing the polar regions, right? I'm still seeing these things that most people don't get a chance to do it. And I'm not doing it the way I used to, but I'm still out there, right? I'm still out there. And I'm living with purpose. I'm living with intention, but I'm doing it slower. And I'm finding that I'm enjoying it a lot more.
It's interesting. I think the word that just came up for me as you were speaking was the word noticing. You are present. You are noticing what's around you. You are noticing what's happening to yourself. You're just very vigilant to your life. And for those who are struggling in that discovery of themselves, I think, your story is really impactful of, what are the tools we need to continue to evolve? Even if our health is devolving, what is it that we need to continue to become more than we were yesterday?
Michael, it's interesting. About 15 years ago, I was diagnosed as being clinically depressed. Therapist said, you should start journaling. I'm going, what? Journaling? Really? I mean, like my daughter writing, all of her, her special thoughts in a book. You got to be kidding me.
Dear Diary.
Exactly. Right. Today was good.
Right.
Next day, today was even better. Exclamation point, right? But I did it. I started it. And I got to tell you, maybe it's a type A. I don't know. But, I started doing it. And, there wasn't anything about the emotional aspect of it. 2 sentences, boom, had a great dinner. But I found, as it became a routine for me, I started to expand a bit more. Yeah, the great meal existed of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I got this from the garden. Or no, I got this from Sam's garden. And I started talking about, it wasn't just going to the store. It was about the people I was meeting to create my meal. And the story started to shape. Still wasn't talking emotionally about anything it meant to me, but I started to story tell, right, about what was going on in my life. And then that evolved to, I'm just going to start keeping track of my daily activities as I'm traveling. And which was great. Yeah, I got stuck to that. So then my journal started becoming a travel memoir, if I could say that, right? And so it became more than a 2-line, it became a couple pages. And so I created this habit of writing. And now, believe it or not, if I don't start my day off with a write, or if I don't end my day with writing in my journal, I feel like I've missed something. Now, the other part to it also is that you mentioned it earlier about being pissed off by being sick. I was furious at being sick. But I also realized that's not going to get me anywhere. But I didn't know how to release that. I could have worked out in my punching bag a bit more, which I did do, but I found out that the writing was a great way of taking it from my brain and heart, putting it on a piece of paper, be as coarse, be as direct, dump down all the crap that's going on in your head, and I felt better. I didn't have that anymore on me because I expunged it. And so it became therapeutic for me in terms of how do you change your mindset, which is a question you asked, right? How do you change your mindset from an active to more passive, right? Without losing anything in terms of what you're visualizing and what you're experiencing? And I have to attribute it to the writing, to be honest with you. I had to attribute it to the journaling because I was using that as a way of getting it out so that I wasn't pent up. Yeah, all right. Man, I'm still going to enjoy it.
So maybe talk a little bit about, you said you just had a book came out earlier this month, and I'm not quite sure when this podcast will be released, but that was early in April. What's the name of the book?
Oh, the name of the book is The Edge of Now. It's actually the 5th book I've written over 18 months. Okay. You talk about type A.
Yeah. The type A still exists.
Holy shit. Because when you were going down that path earlier, I'm going, type A is still here.
Okay.
It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just now how I funnel it, right? In terms of where is my energy going? Yeah, because for a while there, this ADT treatment, I don't know if any of your friends are suffering from cancer and have to go through it, sucks. Because my fatigue has become so overwhelming where you can't do anything. Getting up and going to the bathroom that was good. It's a good workout, man, And so I find writing, I'm engaged up here, so I feel like I'm doing something. Right? I feel like I'm accomplishing something. And so the other part, I haven't talked at all about this, is that another passion of mine now is I'm not writing for the sake of writing. I'm writing about what it's like to live with this terminal cancer or the terminal disease. How do you muster your energies to get through it? And so I have a website that I write on it maybe 2-3 times a week about what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. I write actually for a number of outdoor magazines or travel advisors, right, about their trips and things I may have done with them. And so I find that my days are filled with the writing. So the first book I wrote was called Living While Dying. And that was about the whole process of, all right, someone tells you you're diagnosed with cancer. And then it's a process of getting, aware, accepting, boom.
Right.
And then I wrote another one, Chasing My Northern Lights, which is about the 7 months I took. Because I didn't know how strong I really was. I knew I was pretty strong mentally, but I wanted to test myself. So I actually got into my camper in October, drove up to the Yukon, and spent the winter bouncing between there and Alaska to test my resolve. Getting stuck at 25 below zero, the heater in the camper is shot. You've got icicles on the dog. It's like, okay, is this fun? Yeah, well, what is it?
This is not your typical CPA, folks.
I've written a lot of books.
And again, they'll be, in the show notes, we'll have, links to your website and to any books and things like that we'll provide so people can kind of dig more into what Thom Barrett is doing. And I'm sure that you have at least a billion more stories to share. And maybe I'd like to do is come back and visit with you again and dig into how you're doing. But I think for right now, as the clock ticks on the podcast gods who say you can't go over 45 minutes without lightning and calving and all kinds of other natural disasters, what I'd like to do, Thom Barrett, is first of all, I'm super grateful to you for coming on and sharing, even in light of our early technological glitch. And I'd like to offer you the last word.
Well, I appreciate that. As Michael said, take a look at his comment section for the books and stuff. I won't talk about those, but I will say this, that even with my stage 4 cancer, I believe that the adventure isn't over. The mountains may have changed. The trails look a little bit different, but the spirit, desire to live fully, to love deeply and give back, they'll remain and will always remain, because that's what makes my journey worth continuing. It's what gives me the get up and go in the morning time. So anyone out there who is suffering from, I call it inertia, and it doesn't need to be life-threatening disease. It could be you just got laid off, or it could be that your best friend passed or your spouse passed, right? And we all know that those are the most difficult parts of your life in terms of how do you break through that, because all you want to do is just cuddle in terms of just fetal position and just say, I just want to go through the grieving part. But at some point, you've got to finish that grieving part, and you've got to get back on the horse, so to speak. And it's not an easy process. I will admit that to anyone. It's not an easy process, and it requires you to every morning to wake up with a mindset of, I got to live with purpose today. I got to live with intention. And those intentions don't need to be I'm going to climb a mountain. Intentions mean I'm just going to take a walk in the backyard. But my message is, it's doable, but it requires you to expend the energy to facilitate that.
I am fully and completely inspired and grateful. Thank you, Thom Barrett.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a review on iTunes. Each review helps us get our message out to more listeners so they can begin to craft their next chapter. For more information or to get in touch, visit michaelfk.com. Until next time,